We've all been motivated at one time or another by rewards and punishments, right? When I played Little League, I had two coaches who would bring packs of baseball cards to give us if we hustled especially hard or made a great play. And then running laps around the field was our standard punishment. Our daughter Rebecca came home with fundraiser stuff a couple weeks ago, and she is thoroughly motivated by the list of rewards that are available if you sell enough of the merch. And in the news recently, there was a church that held a free raffle for guns as a way of attracting people to a special event. This was a reward one might seek for coming to church. I'm glad to hear your laughter. From our earliest days, we learned rewards and punishments, and they have been ingrained in us. A major place where these are learned and cultivated is school. Right? In many ways, our school upbringing sort of thrives on the handing out of rewards for good behavior and for good work, or punishments for bad behavior and bad work. And when we attained the ultimate reward, the diploma, we moved on to the next phase of our life, also ruled by rewards and punishments. Right? Our gold stars, A's, detention, and F's may go away once we hit the workplace, but they just show up in new forms, right? Merit raises and promotions and citations and getting fired. And things don't change much in many ways when we talk about faith or religion in our culture. How often do we promise earthly blessings for those who have faith, and we threaten earthly ruin for those who rebel? And we're not really limited to this time and place. So we like to motivate with eternity as well. So we promise heaven as the ultimate reward and threaten hell as the ultimate punishment. We are used to being motivated by external rewards and punishments, and we are used to motivating others in these ways. The carrot and the stick are some of our favorite motivational techniques. With this in mind, I want to turn to Deuteronomy. We spent 11 chapters exploring the Israelites' motivations for seeking God and serving Him. Moses claims that the Israelites should love God because He first loved and chose them. They should draw near to God because God first drew near to them. They should walk in His ways because God has demonstrated His ability to lead them to whatever destination He has promised. And they should obey Him because His words are trustworthy. And God should be worshiped because of who He is and what He has done. In the first 11 chapters of Deuteronomy, Moses is at his very best as a motivational speaker, so that the statutes and the stipulations that then begin to roll out in chapter 12, the people know what is at stake as they're listening to these. These aren't just arbitrary rules that one generation is handing to the other for no reason whatsoever. These are what this next generation is going to need if they are going to walk with their God, if they are going to be the people that God has made them to be. So last week's statutes and stipulations, that large section from chapter 12 to 26 ends in 26. And I want to read the closing paragraph as we then turn toward this morning's passage. And so if you have your Bibles, Deuteronomy 26, and we'll start in verse 16. This day, the Lord your God commands you to do these rules and regulations. You shall therefore be careful to do them with all your heart and with all your soul. Do you hear that, right? 15 chapters and lots of rules and regulations later, Moses sends the hearers back to the motivation given to them through the first 11 chapters. They should be motivated from within to do these things. They should want to obey God And the only place that that kind of desire comes from is the seat of their desire, their hearts, and from their entire being. So we keep reading. You have declared today that the Lord is your God and that you will walk in his ways and keep his statutes and his commandments and his rules, and you will obey his voice. And the Lord has declared today that you are a people for his treasured possession as he has promised you, and that you are to keep all of his commandments, and that he will set you in praise and in fame and in honor high above all nations that he has made, and that you shall be a people holy to the Lord your God as he promised. As the rules come to an end, here in chapter 26, we are reminded of the ultimate purpose of Deuteronomy. Moses says, you have declared today that the Lord is your God. Moses has set out to invite this new generation of Israelites into their own current covenant relationship with God. As much as the Israelites' trust depends on what God has done in the past, their trust must take on a personal and present quality. Faith is something that is lived today. Every church in every Christian tradition attempts to imitate Moses here when they give their young an opportunity to claim faith for themselves. Whether it is a first communion or a catechism or a confirmation or a baptism or a summer camp, churches everywhere are attempting to offer their next generation a personal and present relationship with God. And Deuteronomy is Moses' final plea that a new generation seek God and serve him, loving him, following him, obeying him with their entire lives and entire being. The Lord their God has chosen them. Now they are asked to choose him. If this sounds a little bit like New Testament faith, that's because this is exactly what this is, right? The New Testament and the First Testament call God's people to the very same kind of faith. The God that we find in the First Testament is none other than the God who reveals himself in the New. And so it shouldn't surprise us when we read in Genesis and Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy a God who is merciful and gracious, who is slow to anger, and who is abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. It shouldn't surprise us when this God keeps that love for thousands of generations and when he forgives sin. And it then shouldn't surprise us when God in the New Testament deals honestly and faithfully with the sin of humanity and its corruption of the earth. This whole reminder of where we've been in Deuteronomy leads us into chapters 27 and 28, where we get two things. First, we're given a brief ceremony that will memorialize this generation's covenant commitment to the Lord their God. And I'll be honest, with limited time, that's the thing I'm not going to spend much time talking about. I want to talk about the second thing. If you'd like to talk about the first thing, we can talk about it later. The second thing, we're given a list of rewards and punishments. They're called blessings and curses, but rewards and punishments are essentially what they are. And I don't want to mislead you and suggest that this is somehow the only place or the first place where rewards and punishments are promised. But this is really where they receive their sort of greatest attention and space and emphasis. And I think that happens here for a reason, at the end of the rules and the regulations. I want to make the claim that the reason the rules and regulations end with blessings and curses is as a concession of sorts. God concedes that his people are too stubborn, too hard-hearted to obey him out of some internal desire to love and honor him. And so God's overwhelming desire to preserve these people who lack internal motivation results in him then motivating them with rewards and punishments. So let's read a bit and get a sense of what we're working with. So turn to chapter 28, and we'll begin at verse 1. And if you faithfully obey the voice of the Lord your God, being careful to do all his commandments that I command you today, the Lord your God will set you high above all the nations of the earth. And all these blessings shall come upon you and overtake you if you obey the voice of the Lord your God. Right? We hear the conditional phrase, if you obey. So jump down to verse 15. We're going to do a little bit of jumping here. But if you will not obey the voice of the Lord your God, or be careful to do all his commandments and his statutes that I command you today, then all these curses shall come upon you and overtake you. Here we're presented with a contrast, right? If you obey, if you do not obey. If you obey, rewards to you. If you do not obey, curses to you. Go back to verse 3 now. Blessed shall you be in the city, and blessed shall you be in the field. Jump forward to verse 16. Cursed shall you be in the city, and cursed shall you be in the field. Verse 4. Blessed shall be the fruit of your womb, and the fruit of your ground, and the fruit of your cattle, the increase of your herds, and the herd of your flock. Blessed shall be your basket and your kneading bowl. I've always wanted my kneading bowl blessed, by the way. Verse 17. Verse 17. Cursed shall be your basket and your kneading bowl. Better watch out for that kneading bowl. Cursed shall be the fruit of your womb, and the fruit of your ground, the increase of your herds, and the young of your flock. I think you see where this is going. Verse 6, blessed shall you be when you come in, and blessed shall you be when you go out. And then verse 19, cursed shall you be when you come in, and cursed shall you be when you go out. I imagine that you recognize the unfolding pattern in these blessings and curses. Based on whether or not the Israelites faithfully obey the voice of the Lord their God, doing all the commandments that he commands, they will receive from the Lord either blessings or curses. Blessings and curses that in many respects are comprehensive, right? They cover all areas of life. Life at home and life in their communities and their work and their possessions are all covered by these promises. The promise of reward or the promise of punishment. But the question has to be asked, so how do these blessings and curses relate to love? If the overwhelming movement of Deuteronomy is that people should be internally motivated to serve God, what does that mean that God appeals to external motivators? And wealth and comfort and security and honor are offered as this positive motivation, while the threat of death and poverty and danger and shame are countered to cover negative motivation. But all of this is external. It is all about either receiving or avoiding things external to the Israelites' own self and their relationship with God. And so I want to offer a way of maybe thinking about these things as they set up the story that follows in the Bible, specifically, or connecting it to perhaps a TV show. If a television show opens with a short clip before the opening theme or credits, does anyone know what that's called? A teaser or a cold open, generally, are what they refer to these as. It's a way of sort of hooking you so that you'll watch the rest of the episode. And writers use a cold open in a lot of different ways. Some use it just as a way of setting the stage, getting the plot going, give you something to think about or care about. But others use it in much more complex ways. Often a writer will use the cold open as a way of questioning what you thought about a character in the show. Or they'll create a morally questionable situation that you have to see how it's responded to. Or the writer will just suggest the possibility or something happening in the show that you just can't believe knowing the show. Right? And in all of these ways, a cold open asks you to watch the show with sort of certain questions in mind. Chapter 28 of Deuteronomy is a compelling cold open for the rest of the First Testament. And here it is at the end of Deuteronomy, really setting the stage. Like Charles Dickens' classic opening, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Chapter 28 presents us with the tale of two Israels. Verses 1 through 14 tell the story of a people that are faithful in their obedience to God, and it's a story about abundance and life and human thriving. But then starting at verse 15, we're told a very different story. Contrasting story. And as this story is told, it actually turns out to be worse than just the opposite of the story of blessing. I mean, this is a story that is dark and twisted as they descend into utter chaos and brokenness and abandonment and death, and eventually a return to the very slavery from which they were rescued. And so you get to the end of chapter 28 and you think, so which will it be? Which way will the Israelites go? But more central to the story than that question, or those questions, is who is this God who makes such promises? These blessings and curses offer us a fairly simple conception of who God is. God is the one who always rewards faithfulness. God is the one who always punishes failure. God is little more than a formula to figure out in this conception. The most comprehensive study done on the religious beliefs and practices of youth in America claims that among those teenagers who identify as Christians, this simple view of God is what they've been given by the previous generation. That God is eager to reward them like a good teacher or parent might if they obey. And God is just as ready to punish them when they fail. One of the most glaring examples of this among teenagers has to do with their sexuality. Youth abstinence programs often center around rewards and punishments. These programs often promise happy, healthy, enjoyable sex if youth will wait until they're married. And likewise, they promise disease and unwanted pregnancies and heartbreak if they don't. And so kids are taught, obey God and he will reward you. Disobey and he will punish you. But the awkward truth becomes that there are some who waited to have sex until they were married who find sex incredibly difficult and often unenjoyable. And there are some who didn't wait and they somehow have a positive experience with no apparent repercussions. If we live with such a simple, moralistic view of God, having faith in a God who diligently rewards the faithful and punishes the wicked, it won't take long before the complexity of life crushes our faith. It shouldn't surprise us when teenagers abandon this simplistic faith, when their faithfulness has gone unrewarded and their failures have gone unpunished. They can do the math, right? Returning to the idea of Deuteronomy 28, then, as this cold open, this passage suggests that this is who God is, that God is like the pagan gods of the ancient world, who rewards those for faithfulness and destroys those for faithlessness. In fact, chapter 28 ends with a shocking final claim. So turn to verse 68 with me, where we read, "And the Lord will bring you back in ships to Egypt, a journey that I promised that you should never make again. And there you shall offer yourselves for sale to your enemies as male and female slaves, but there will be no buyer." If you have been with us all year, traveling through Torah, reading it and rereading it, this last sentence should cause you to shudder. These are the words that then fade into black as the title card of the show comes up and its opening credits begin. Because Moses has announced that if the Israelites are unfaithful, God will essentially undo them. Like the flood, undoing creation, returning it to chaos, God will undo the Israelites, returning them to the slavery that he rescued them from. And as the credits roll, we ought to move to the edge of our seats wondering, who is this God? who promises such things? Is he the God who is merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love that the story so far has told us he is? Or is he the God who formulaically assigns blessings and curses like Santa with a naughty and nice list? Right? Many who claim to follow Jesus have read these blessings and curses as though they belong to a Santa God. Joel Osteen has created the largest church in America and has gained unbelievable influence around the world by teaching these blessings and cursings as though they come from a Santa God. Rather than desire a God who is more complex than Santa, he offers people the chance to settle for a God that they can control with their own behavior, with their own self-help efforts, and with their own optimism. Deuteronomy 28 suggests that this is who God is. But in light of everything we've seen in previous episodes, from creation to the Israelites' arrival at the plains of Moab as Moses begins to speak to them, we know that there has to be more going on. And so this cold open is so good because it urges us to stick with the story. It calls us to follow Israel the way that we would our favorite television characters. We're to stay invested in the story, and we do because we're compelled to see how things turn out. What happens when the Israelites do fail? And we discover pretty quickly, if we read the story, they're not crushed. At least not immediately. As Derek suggested earlier, God is always at work bringing restoration. But what happens when the Israelites fail? Who is God in those times and places? And then what happens if they succeed? Is God truly so simple? Or is he infinitely more complex? I'm convinced that the blessings and curses found in chapter 28 are not part of God's hopes for humanity. They are a concession to human sin. God desires that his people would love him and serve him because they desire to do so, and yet his people refuse because they are too stubborn, because their hearts are too hard. And God then, refusing to take over their desires and force them to love him, he chooses instead to preserve them by motivating them with things that they do desire and things that they do fear. But, and I hate to tell you how the episode ends, rewards and punishments won't be enough to turn God's people toward him. Rewards and punishments can't change hearts, and God's people will time and again demonstrate the true condition of their hearts. There is a contemporary confirmation of this truth in a book that Derek and I read earlier this year. The book includes an extended survey of a wide range of research done over several decades. It's a really interesting book. You guys are like, what? I'm never reading that. But this research overwhelmingly shows over decades, it attempts to evaluate the effectiveness of rewards on motivating behavior. And the overwhelming consensus of this research is that rewards not only cannot motivate long-term behavior, but they often undermine our hopes that people will eventually do things for the right reasons. And we see this in the Israelites. They do not change. They only become more oriented to clinging to blessings and avoiding curses at all costs while keeping God at arm's length. The research reveals that employers and educators often struggle with workers and students who do the bare minimum. David, can I get an amen? Connie. You got him pretty young. All right. But David, high school, we got right there. Who struggle to do the bare minimum? They do enough to get the reward they want in order to move to the next reward that they have their eye on. But if they can take a shortcut, if they can give minimal effort and still get the reward, the research says overwhelmingly they will every time. Why? Because they have no internal motivation to work hard or to put in that extra effort, because they've been interested primarily in that external motivator, that reward. It shouldn't surprise us that forms of Christianity pop up that are based purely on the promise of material blessing, of heaven, or the threat of hell, and that they generally do not compel the kind of radical self-sacrifice that Jesus and the apostles call us to. Why? Because if we've received our reward, and that's what we were looking for, at least the promise of our reward, if we know we're saved and that's what we're interested in, then we can settle into doing the bare minimum to maintain that salvation, that reward, because that's ultimately what we want. I know where I'm going can become an excuse for bad living. I know where I'm going can often reveal a heart that remains unchanged. If we show up to worship the sort of bare minimum, if we give of our resources the bare minimum, if we serve the bare minimum, if we do the bare minimum, we are probably being motivated by external factors, the promise of reward or the threat of punishment. But Jesus did not die for us so that we can be motivated by rewards and punishments. This is not the good news. The good news is that if we will follow Jesus, we can actually have our wicked hearts of stone exchanged for a beating heart of flesh. The good news is that Jesus has made a way for us to love the Lord our God with all of our hearts and souls and minds and strength, and to love our neighbors as ourselves. If these desires to love God and to love our neighbors are not essential desires of our lives, the good news is that today we are God's treasured possession. And today we are being invited to let God redirect our desires, to take our hearts and to make them new. Thanks, friends. Derek's going to come up and he's going to invite us to the table.